My name is Naomi Bennett, and I was 26 years old when I signed the adoption papers for a baby girl my own mother said would destroy my future. I was single. I had a modest 2-bedroom apartment, a crib I built with my own hands, and a job in child protective services that paid just enough to keep the lights on and the rent covered if nothing went wrong. But things always go wrong. That is one of the first lessons you learn when you work with broken families. There was no husband beside me, no trust fund, no family waiting with casseroles and congratulations, no one volunteering for midnight feedings or diaper changes or emergency babysitting when daycare fell through. My mother said I could barely manage my own life. My father said bringing that child home would ruin everything I had left. And still, I brought her home. On the same day, I held her for the first time in my apartment. On the same afternoon, I fed her a bottle while sitting on a secondhand sofa with one worn armrest and a spring that pressed against my thigh. A letter arrived in my mailbox. Heavy cream paper, monogrammed, formal. My mother's handwriting on the front. It wasn't a card, it wasn't a blessing, it wasn't even a warning disguised as love. It was a rejection dressed up in expensive stationery. What none of them knew was this. 14 years later, that same little girl would stand in front of an auditorium full of people and read my mother's words back to her, not in anger, not with tears, not with revenge in her voice, with truth. And truth, when it arrives at the right moment, can do more damage than fury ever could. Before Ava, before the letter, before any of the years that taught me exactly what family is and what it is not, I was a county caseworker. I worked in a government building with beige walls, stale coffee, and fluorescent lights that buzzed louder whenever rain hit the windows. My desk was never clean. It held 3 permanent stacks of files, active cases, pending reviews, and the children I could not stop thinking about after 5 o'clock. Every folder had a story inside it. Some ended in safety, some ended in compromise, some ended in polite reports that hid ugly truths. I was good at my job. I knew how to read a home before I stepped into it. I could tell when a placement looked perfect on paper but felt wrong in my bones. By 25, I had completed enough home evaluations to know what stability was supposed to look like, and enough emergency removals to know how rarely the world delivered it. I believed in the system, but only the way a tired person believes in medicine that works half the time. Around that same period, when I was 24, my gynecologist sat across from me in a room that smelled like disinfectant and printer ink, and calmly told me I had stage 3 endometriosis. She said it with the practiced softness doctors use when they know a sentence is going to rearrange someone's life. She explained inflammation, scar tissue, complications. I only asked one question. Can I still have children? She hesitated long enough for me to know the answer before she gave it. It's unlikely, she said. Not impossible, but unlikely. If motherhood matters to you, you may want to think about your options sooner rather than later. I left with a folded pamphlet in my purse and a pressure in my chest I couldn't name. I did not tell my family for 6 months. When I finally did, it was at Sunday dinner, between the salad and the roast, because in my parents' house, every life-altering conversation somehow happened between courses. My mother, Lorraine, set down her fork with the same composed motion she used when she disapproved of something but wanted to look civilized while doing it. Well, she said, maybe that's God's way of telling you that motherhood wasn't meant for you. She said it like she was offering guidance, like she was helping me make peace with something holy and inevitable. My father, Charles, reached for the bread basket and avoided my eyes. My younger sister, Melanie, stared at her plate and said nothing at all. That silence sat at the table like a fourth parent. It had always lived with us. Silence after sharp words, silence after humiliation, silence after one of my mother's verdicts. Silence was how the rest of the family survived Lorraine Bennett. I drove home with the windows down and both hands tight on the steering wheel. I did not cry that night. Some pain is too clean for tears. It settles deeper than that. The next morning at work, I opened a file on a newborn girl surrendered at Regional Medical 3 days earlier. No next of kin, no father listed, no approved placement, no relatives in progress, just a baby girl with a temporary ID bracelet and a future floating between strangers. I read her file once, then again, then a third time. Nothing dramatic happened, no music, no revelation, no lightning from heaven. Just a quiet internal shift, like a key turning in a lock I had stopped trying years ago. 4 months later, I began the process to qualify as an adoptive parent myself. It was almost surreal, being assessed by the same system I had spent years helping administer. I knew every form. I knew what the questions were trying to measure, and I knew exactly how honest you had to be without sounding unstable. Financial disclosures, background checks, home inspections, personal references, safety plans, parenting philosophy, emergency contacts. I had helped hundreds of people through the process. Now I was sitting in the same chair, offering up my own life to be measured under fluorescent lights. My supervisor, Judith Palmer, wrote one of my references. When I finally asked, she leaned back in her chair and laughed. "Naomi," she said, "I've been waiting for you to ask me that for a year." When the approval came through, I told my family at Sunday dinner again. I still don't know why I chose that table. Maybe because some part of me believed if I set it there, in the center of the room where my mother ruled everything, I could make it real in a way she couldn't dismiss. I waited until plates were full. Lorraine sat at the head of the table like always, Charles across from me, Melanie beside her husband Dean, who cut his chicken in neat, efficient pieces like he wanted no part in any emotional mess that might unfold. "I've been approved to adopt," I said. "A baby girl from foster care. The matching is next week." No one moved. Lorraine set down her fork slowly, intentionally, as if the cutlery itself deserved more care than my announcement. "You cannot even take care of yourself, Naomi." She didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. My mother had perfected the art of quiet cruelty. She knew how to say devastating things at a volume so controlled everyone else felt rude for reacting. Charles shook his head. "That child will ruin your life." I looked at Melanie. She kept staring at her napkin. "She's not a problem," I said. "She's a baby." Lorraine leaned back in her chair. "And what exactly am I supposed to tell people? That my daughter is taking in someone else's burden and calling it a blessing?" "She is not a burden." "She is," my mother said. "And you are choosing this over everything respectable." That word stayed with me. Respectable. As if motherhood only counted when it arrived with matching jeans, wedding photographs, and church-approved timing. I put my napkin on the table, stood up, and walked out. No one came after me. The drive home took 37 minutes. I know because I watched every minute of it. My sister had always lived a different version of family than I had. Melanie married Dean at 23. By 25, they were in a 4-bedroom house with a down payment funded by my parents. $40,000. A gift, my mother called it. Though she announced it to so many people, it sounded more like an investment in reputation. When Melanie got pregnant with her first son, Lorraine threw a baby shower with 40 guests, custom decorations, a 3-tier cake, and a speech that ended with tears. "My baby is having a baby," she said, and half the room cried with her. When Melanie had her second child, my mother moved into their home for 2 weeks. She cooked, cleaned, folded laundry, told everyone at church that grandmotherhood was the most beautiful role a woman could ever receive. And when I decided to adopt, I got a letter telling me not to come home. 2 weeks after that dinner, Melanie called me near midnight. Her voice was hushed, careful, almost guilty. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wish I could help, but you know how Mom is." I stood in my kitchen with one hand on the counter and the other gripping the phone hard enough to hurt. "But Mom is what?" Melanie exhaled slowly. "She won't let this go. And if I get involved, she'll turn on me too." "So you're not getting involved?" A long pause. "I just can't be in the middle of this." "You are in the middle of it," I said. "You've always been in the middle of it. You just picked the safer side." She didn't answer. I hung up. I never hated my sister. Not really. But I learned something that night that would take years to fully understand. Forgiveness and memory are not the same thing. You can carry both. You can release the first and keep the second sharp. The day I adopted Ava was a Thursday in March. It rained all morning, the kind of soft, steady rain that makes the world feel muted and suspended. I wore a navy cardigan, sensible flats, and the expression of someone trying not to crack open from the inside. I had packed the diaper bag the night before, then I unpacked it, then packed it again, then checked it at 5:41 a.m. because sleep had abandoned me entirely. Judith drove me to the agency because she said she didn't trust me behind the wheel in that condition, and she was probably right. The foster agency occupied an old office building with faded carpet, beige walls, and that same familiar institutional hum. A caseworker named Renee greeted us in the lobby. She smiled when she saw me. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready longer than I can explain." They brought Ava in wrapped in a white blanket, 7 pounds and change, with deep brown eyes that kept tracking the ceiling lights as if she had already decided the world needed to be examined carefully. Her tiny hand opened once, then closed around my finger, not dramatically, not tightly, just enough. Enough was all it took. I signed the papers in a little room with a table that wobbled every time I leaned on it. My signature went on page 11, 14, and 22. Blue ink. Slightly trembling hand. Breath held too long. Renee passed me the final packet and said the words I had wanted someone to say to me for years. "Congratulations, Mom." I don't remember whether I answered. Judith cried anyway. I drove home with Ava in the back seat in a car seat I had installed, removed, and reinstalled 3 times that week. Judith followed behind in her own car, just in case, as if motherhood could be escorted safely home with another sedan. My apartment was small, but it was clean and ready. 2 bedrooms, fresh sheets, a crib with a mobile of wooden stars I found at a consignment shop. I laid Ava in the crib for a moment, and she stared up at the stars turning above her like she had landed on another planet and was deciding whether to stay. Then I checked the mailbox. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, expensive, deliberate. Lorraine Bennett's monogram in the top corner. My mother had sent a formal letter on the day I adopted my daughter, and something in me already knew it held no kindness. I carried it inside with Ava against my chest. I set it on the counter while I warmed a bottle. But the whole kitchen changed around that envelope. It sat there like a threat, not physically heavy, morally heavy, emotionally armed. I opened it standing up. Naomi, I cannot support this decision. You are throwing your life away for someone else's mistake. That child comes from God knows where. You do not know her blood, her history, or the kind of trouble she will bring into your home. And you expect us to act as if this is normal? Do not come here. Do not call. Do not bring her into this family. Until you come to your senses, you are on your own. Mother, I read it once, then again, then a third time. Because some pain is so absurd, your mind keeps checking to see whether it misunderstood. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Then I found an old shoebox in the closet from a pair of boots I bought in college and barely wore. I placed the letter inside, closed the lid, and put the box on the highest shelf. Then I fed my daughter. I did not cry that night. I wanted to. I could feel the words in my chest like a stone too large to swallow. But Ava needed a bottle at midnight and another at 3:12, and by sunrise I was too exhausted to feel anything in one piece. I told myself I would deal with the letter later. Later turned into 14 years. The first year nearly broke me. No babysitter. No mother dropping by with food. No father asking whether the baby was sleeping through the night. No sister texting to say she was outside with coffee and clean onesies. Daycare had a waiting list 3 months long, and I had to return to work after 8 weeks because leave runs out whether your body is ready or not. The county did not care that I was a single adoptive mother. Forms are not built for tenderness. For the first 2 weeks back, Judith kept Ava in a portable crib in her office until a place opened at a community daycare on Elm Street. I paid money I did not really have and pretended not to feel the panic every time another expense appeared. Ava had colic, and not the manageable kind, the devastating kind. The kind that began in the evening and stretched into the early hours like punishment. I walked the apartment hallway in socks with her pressed to my shoulder, bouncing lightly, humming nonsense lullabies because my brain was too tired to remember real ones. One night, near midnight, my neighbor from 4B knocked on the door with irritation already loaded into his face. "Can you keep that baby quiet?" I adjusted Ava higher against my shoulder. "I'm trying." "Try harder." He walked away before I could answer. I closed the door and kept walking. Judith started leaving casseroles on my doorstep once a week. No note, just a dish, a lid, and the quiet generosity of someone who understood that pride doesn't feed people. Christmas came. Lorraine hosted a dinner for 14 relatives. I was not invited. Melanie texted me, "Merry Christmas, miss you." I did not reply. I bought a 2-foot artificial tree from a discount store and placed it on the coffee table. Judith gave Ava a tiny silver bell ornament. Ava was 9 months old and sat in her high chair staring at the bell as if it held all the answers adults kept failing to provide. The shoebox stayed on the shelf. I never opened it. I didn't need to. Some wounds don't need fresh contact to keep hurting. The second year was easier. Not easy. Easier. Ava slept through the night at 13 months, and I remember waking up in a panic the first time because the silence felt suspicious. Her daycare teacher moved her to the toddler room and told me she was curious, social, observant, always pointing at things as though the world owed her labels. I got promoted to senior caseworker. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to stop checking my bank balance every morning before coffee. Then I found a foreclosure listing on Birch Lane. Small house, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, fence in poor condition, yard overgrown, price low enough to make me suspicious and hopeful at the same time. I made an offer lower than asking, and to my complete shock, the bank accepted. Judith helped me move. She carried boxes while I carried Ava on my hip. "You're building something," she told me. "I'm just buying a house." "No," she said. "You're building something." I painted Ava's room a pale yellow. I replaced the fence myself on weekends with borrowed tools and YouTube videos. I installed a shelf for books because Ava had already developed the habit of pulling every title within reach whenever we went to the library. Her first word was mama. She said it at 14 months while standing at the kitchen counter, balancing on both feet like a tiny queen claiming territory. I turned off the sink and picked her up. "That's right," I whispered. "I'm mama." From then on, I told her every night before bed, long before she could understand the meaning. "I chose you, Ava. Before you could walk, before you could talk, before you even knew my face, I chose you. And I would choose you again?" She didn't understand the words yet, but she understood the safety in them. My father sent me a birthday card that year. No note, just his signature. I placed it in a drawer and forgot about it. Guilt without action is still abandonment. I had no use for ceremonial conscience. Ava was 5 when her kindergarten teacher asked me to come in for a conference. The word conference made my stomach tighten, because parents only hear that word in 2 tones, concern or praise. I sat across from Mrs. Lynn, who had Ava's reading sheets spread in front of her like evidence. "Ms. Bennett," she said, "Ava is reading at a 4th grade level." I blinked. "She's in kindergarten." "I know," Mrs. Lynn said with a smile. "That is why I asked you to come." I sat there for a moment, stunned in the quietest way. For 5 years I had been carrying words my family had thrown at us like prophecy. Burden, mistake, trouble, ruin. And now a teacher was telling me that the child who was supposed to destroy my life was already 3 years ahead of the room. "Is that a problem?" I asked, because fear learns to wear practical clothes. Mrs. Lynn laughed softly. "No, it's the opposite of a problem." Ava was bright in every direction. She shared crayons. She helped another child tie his shoes every morning. She asked difficult questions at inappropriate times, and then smiled when adults stumbled over their answers. I had told her from an early age that she was adopted, not all at once, in pieces small enough for a child to carry without confusion. "You grew in another woman's body," I told her once while tucking her in, "but you grew in my heart before I ever met you." She thought about that very seriously. "But you're my real mom," I smoothed her hair. "Always." Even then, long before she knew what had been said about her, she already understood the only truth that mattered. When Ava was 6.5, my phone rang while I was cooking spaghetti. Caller ID showed one word I had not seen in years: mother. I turned down the burner, walked into the hallway, and answered. "Naomi?" Lorraine said, as if no time had passed at all. "I've been thinking. Perhaps it's time I met her. Her, not your daughter, not your child, not my granddaughter, her." "Ava," I said. "Her name is Ava." "I know what her name is." "Do you?" A tiny pause. "I simply think it may be appropriate to meet privately. Somewhere discreet. A park, perhaps. Just the 3 of us. Somewhere discreet, without labels, without accountability." I leaned against the wall and watched my daughter through the kitchen doorway. She was coloring a horse purple and orange and humming a song about a cat on the moon. "You mean you don't want to be introduced as her grandmother?" "That is not what I said. It's what you meant." Her breathing sharpened through the line. "It's complicated. It has been 6 years." "Exactly." I looked at Ava again, so open, so certain, so undeserving of even a shadow of my mother's performance. "No," I said. Silence. "No?" "Ava either has grandparents or she doesn't. I will not bring a stranger into her life and teach her to call it family just to protect your image." My mother inhaled the way she always did when denied. Tight, controlled, furious. "I'll call you back." She didn't. 3 more years passed. In that time, I stopped waiting for reconciliation to arrive wearing manners. I had spaghetti to finish and a child who needed me to decide whether bright orange or burnt orange was the correct color for a horse's mane, which, according to Ava, was an extremely important distinction. Then came the grocery store, Tuesday afternoon, cereal aisle. I was reaching for Cheerios when a woman in a quilted vest touched my elbow and said my name like we were old friends. "Naomi Bennett?" I turned and recognized Carol Whitman, one of Lorraine's church friends. Bake sales, Bible studies, my mother's orbit. "Oh, sweetheart," Carol said gently. "I heard things have been hard. Are you managing all right?" I set the cereal in the cart and looked at her carefully. "What did she tell you?" Carol's smile faltered. "Only that you took on more than you could handle. That the whole situation has been difficult. That you've been struggling." Struggling. For a second, something hot and humiliating moved through me. Not because Carol believed it, because I understood instantly what had been happening for years behind my back. My mother had not just rejected me privately, she had been publicly narrating my collapse to anyone willing to listen. I straightened. I supervise 12 people at Child Protective Services, I said. My daughter is in the gifted program at Brookfield Elementary. She reads 2 grade levels ahead and just took second place at the district science fair. Carol blinked. Oh, we're fine. She shifted her purse strap, embarrassed now in a way that did not help me at all. Well, that's good to hear. I'm sure it is. I turned back to my cart and kept shopping, but my hands were shaking. Not from rage, from clarity. For years, while I was building a home, paying bills, raising a brilliant child, surviving every lonely holiday and every emergency alone, my mother had been standing in church foyers and parking lots and living rooms, telling people I was barely managing. Poor Naomi. Such a sad situation, such a burden, such a cautionary tale. She wanted my life to become a warning story, so I made sure it became a different one. By 3rd grade, Ava brought home a family tree assignment. It had blank branches spreading across the page, waiting for names we didn't have. She sat at the kitchen table with her pencil ready. "Mom," she asked, "do I have grandparents?" I was drying a plate. I set it down. "You do." "Where are they?" "About 40 minutes away." She frowned. "Why don't they come here?" I chose my words the way I chose words in case reports. Carefully, truthfully, without unnecessary sharp edges. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt people, and then they don't know how to fix what they broke. Did they make a choice about me? They made a choice about both of us. She was quiet. Were they mean to you? I held her gaze. They were afraid, I think, and afraid people can say ugly things when they want control. She looked down at the worksheet, then drew the tree with only 2 branches filled in. Naomi. Ava. Then she colored the leaves with hard, concentrated strokes and pushed the paper toward me. "There," she said. "That's our family." I looked at the page for a long time. That's our family. People think justice always arrives loudly. Sometimes it arrives as a child with a crayon telling you the truth more cleanly than any adult ever has. That night, after Ava went to sleep, I stood in front of the closet and looked up at the top shelf. The shoebox was still there. Same place, same lid, same letter inside. I thought about taking it down. I thought about burning it. Instead, I closed the closet door and walked away. Some things keep better in the dark until the right pair of hands is ready to bring them into the light. A year later, I got another promotion. Program director, countywide. More responsibility than sleep. More money than I had ever imagined making the day I first brought Ava home. I would oversee supervisors, caseworkers, budgets, audits, emergency placements, policy reviews, the entire fragile machinery of child protection for the county. I said yes before the administrator finished the sentence. Judith had retired by then. She was living near the lake in a little cottage and growing tomatoes like it was a full-time moral obligation. When I called to tell her, she laughed in the phone so hard I had to hold it away from my ear. "I told you," she said. "You were building something." The local paper ran a profile on me. Small piece, back section, government leadership story. They used the stiff official photo where I looked, according to Judith, like a woman who can spot dishonesty from 3 zip codes away. I cut out the article and taped it to the fridge beside Ava's honor roll certificate. Melanie texted me after seeing it online. "Congratulations, Naomi. No warmth, no conversation, no follow-up, just punctuation and distance." "Thank you," I wrote back. My mother saw it too. I know because Carol Whitman stopped me at the pharmacy and said, "Your mother mentioned your article." She sounded surprised. Surprised. Not proud. Not happy. Not relieved. Surprised. As if she had been waiting for my life to collapse under the weight of my own decision, and every year that passed without that collapse offended her private script. Ava turned 13 that summer. By then she was tall for her age, composed in ways that sometimes startled me, and gifted with the kind of quiet observation that makes adults underestimate her until it is too late. We had decided to redo the master closet because the shelves were sagging. I left for the hardware store one afternoon and told her to stack the boxes into the hallway while I picked up brackets and screws. "I'll sort it when I get back," I said. I was gone 45 minutes. When I came home, the hallway was lined with boxes, old tax records, winter scarves, photo albums, and the shoebox. It was on the floor, slightly apart from the rest. The lid sat crooked. Not dramatically, just enough. Ava was in the kitchen doing homework, earbuds in, expression neutral. "Thanks for helping," I called. She looked up. "No problem." I picked up the shoebox once she wasn't watching and opened it. The envelope was inside, but the fold looked different. There was a fresh bend near the bottom corner. A tiny mark only a mother would notice. Ava had read it. She knew. She knew what her grandmother had called her. Someone else's mistake. I put the box back on the shelf, higher this time, though both of us knew height meant nothing now, and waited for her to say something. She didn't. Not that night, not the next morning, not that week. But a silence had moved into the house, and this silence was different from the one I grew up with. This one was active, thinking, forming, becoming. Ava changed after that summer, though not in obvious ways. She still made straight A's, still devoured library books on Tuesdays, still beat me at word games and corrected my punctuation in text messages. But underneath, I could feel a new kind of attention in her. She began asking about the early years. What was I like as a baby? Tiny, loud, beautiful, exhausting. Were you scared? Every day. Then why didn't you give up? I looked at her over the dinner table. Because giving up was never one of the choices. She nodded and filed that away. She started writing in a composition notebook late at night. Whenever I passed her room, she'd be bent over it, hair falling into her face, one hand moving steadily across the page. If I knocked, she'd close it. Homework, she'd say. It wasn't homework. One evening in October, she was rinsing dishes while I reviewed case notes at the table. "Mom," she said without turning around, "if someone wrote something cruel about you, would you want people to know?" I set down my pen. "That depends." "On what?" "On who wrote it, and whether the truth matters more than protecting them." She turned off the water and looked at me. "What if it was someone who was supposed to love you?" The question landed harder than she knew. Then the truth matters even more. She held my gaze for a long second. "Okay," she said. Then she went back to the dishes. I went back to my file, but I did not read a word for the next 10 minutes. Ava entered 8th grade 2 weeks later, and it was as if the whole school finally caught up to what I had known for years. Her teachers adored her. Her grades were nearly perfect. She won regional competitions without becoming arrogant about them. She stayed kind, which somehow impressed me more than her brilliance. Intelligence can be inherited or taught. Kindness is a choice, and she made it repeatedly. In October, she won the regional science fair with a filtration project built from recycled materials. In December, Principal Mercer called my office and said, with obvious satisfaction, "Ava Bennett is our projected valedictorian." It took me a second to answer. "She'll give the graduation speech in June." I stared at the manila folder on my desk and thought about a newborn girl in a state file with no placement attached. 14 years from a case file to a podium. 14 years from a letter of rejection to a room that would be forced to hear what love had built. That evening, Ava came home, set her backpack down, and said, "I want to write my own speech." "Of course," I said. "It's your speech." I already know what I want to say. The way she said it should have told me more. Calm, certain, like someone who had been carrying a blade wrapped in cloth and had finally decided where it belonged. But I trusted her, and trust sometimes means you don't ask enough questions until the answer is already walking toward a microphone. In March, I did something I had not expected to do. I called Lorraine. The number had never left my phone, which says more about me than I fully understand. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hello? Mother, it's Naomi." A pause. Naomi. "Ava is graduating middle school in June. She's valedictorian. She'll be giving the commencement address." Silence. Then, "Well, that's impressive." Impressive, as if she were commenting on landscaping. "June 14th, I said. 2 in the afternoon, Jefferson Middle School." "We'll be there," she said too quickly. Not because she was moved, because she had already started imagining the audience. I hung up and sat staring at the wall. I was not doing it for closure. I was not doing it because I believed an invitation could undo 14 years. I was doing it because Ava deserved to look out into a full room, and because a small, quiet part of me wanted my parents to see with their own eyes what they had refused to touch. When I told Ava I had invited them, she turned from her desk very slowly. "Good," she said. "They should come." Not might. Should. There was judgment in that word. Purpose. A sentence already half written. I noticed it. I just didn't understand it yet. Melanie called a week later. "Mom's acting strange about the graduation," she said. "When is she not?" "No, I mean, she's telling people she's reconnecting with you. She bought a new dress. She's telling everyone in her church group that her granddaughter is valedictorian." My hand tightened around the phone. Her granddaughter. Yes, she's using that phrase now. How convenient, I thought. How perfectly timed. "Are you coming?" I asked. A pause too familiar to be surprising. "The boys have soccer that weekend. It's a Saturday." "I know." There was always something. There had always been something. Sick kids, weather, Dean's schedule, travel, timing, conflict. Melanie had built a museum of excuses and stocked it carefully for years. I understand, I said, and this time I really did. Anger requires expectation. By then, I had none left for my sister. A few days later, Carol Whitman found me at the post office with the kind of smile people wear when they think they are sharing charming community gossip. "Your mother is so excited," she said. "She told everyone Ava gets her brains from the Bennett side." I looked at Carol and nearly laughed. The Bennett side. My mother had not attended a birthday, not one school recital, not one Christmas morning, not one library Tuesday, not one sick day, science project, scraped knee, spelling test, or parent conference. But now, with an auditorium waiting and a title to claim, suddenly she had discovered bloodlines again. Lorraine bought a lavender dress for that graduation. I know because Carol made sure I knew. She described it like it was part of an event plan. Ava worked on her speech every night for 3 weeks. She closed her bedroom door and wrote. Sometimes I heard her reading it aloud softly, testing rhythm and breath. She had my habit of listening to words before trusting them. I offered help once. "Need another set of eyes?" She opened the door halfway. "No, Mom. This one's mine." I nodded. Fair enough. But I noticed other things. She began flipping through old photo albums from her childhood. The blurry early pictures taken on a cheap camera because it was all I could afford. Ava in the crib. Ava in the backyard on a blanket. Ava at the library holding a stack of books too tall for her arms. She asked questions at dinner that sounded casual until I looked at them closely. What was the foster home like? Small, clean, kind. They took good care of you. How old was I when you first held me? 3 days. Did anyone help you in the beginning? Judith did. She was the only one. Ava nodded and wrote something on her napkin before folding it into her pocket. Another night, I passed her room and saw the door cracked open. She was sitting at her desk with a cream envelope in her hand. The envelope. My mother's monogram caught the light. I kept walking. My stomach dropped. My feet did not. Something in me understood that whatever Ava was doing, she had earned the right to do it. That letter had been written about both of us. Maybe it had belonged to me in pain, but it belonged to her in truth. June 14th arrived hot and bright. By noon, it was already 82 degrees. I ironed Ava's white dress at the kitchen table while she ate pancakes with the calm of someone heading toward certainty. "Nervous?" I asked. "No, not even a little." She sipped her orange juice. "I know exactly what I'm going to say." Steam rose from the iron. I watched her through it and felt, for the first time, that there was a part of my daughter's mind I could not enter anymore. Not because she had shut me out, because she had become her own person, and some rooms inside a person are private even when they are built from your own love. We drove to Jefferson Middle School in my old Honda. The parking lot was already filling up, balloons tied to mirrors, grandparents in sensible shoes, parents holding phones and flowers and pride. Then I saw the silver sedan in the second row, my mother's car. Ava saw it too. "They're here," she said, not a question. She adjusted her cap in the mirror, smoothed her gown, and touched the pocket on the right side. A small gesture. Quick, protective. I saw the shape of the envelope under the fabric. She caught me looking and held my eyes. "Ready?" she asked without speaking. "Ready?" I answered the same way. We walked in together. Judith was already there in the third row, center aisle, wearing coral and looking like she had reserved her whole heart for this day. "Wouldn't miss it," she whispered as she squeezed my hand. Ava disappeared backstage. Then my parents entered. They walked down the center aisle like they belonged in the story. Lorraine first, in lavender, with her hair freshly styled and her pearl earrings in place. Charles behind her in a navy blazer and pressed slacks, looking neat, passive, and resigned in the same old way. They did not choose a discreet seat. They chose the front row, left side, visible, strategic. Lorraine smiled at people as she passed. She nodded to a woman I vaguely recognized. She sat with the poise of someone prepared to be associated with success. Judith leaned toward me. "Those your parents?" "In theory." Lorraine turned, scanned the room, spotted me in the third row, and gave me a stiff little nod. Not warmth, not apology, recognition without humility. Then she leaned toward the woman beside her and said, loud enough for nearby rows to hear, "Our granddaughter is the valedictorian." Our. My chest went cold. The ceremony began. Principal Mercer welcomed the families. There was a violin performance, awards, scholarships, names, clapping, Proud tears. The gym smelled faintly of floor polish and summer heat and cheap flower bouquets. Then Principal Mercer returned to the microphone. "And now," he said, smiling toward the stage, "it is my honor to introduce this year's valedictorian, Ava Bennett." The room shifted. Lorraine sat up straighter. I stopped breathing. Ava walked to the podium with the measured posture of someone far older than 14. White dress under the gown, cap straight, chin lifted. She carried one folded page and a cream envelope. She set them both on the podium, adjusted the microphone lower, looked out over 300 people. She found me first and gave me a small smile, private, gentle. For me alone. Then she found Lorraine, held her gaze for one beat longer than necessary. "Good afternoon," she began. "My name is Ava Bennett, and today I want to talk about family." Her voice was steady, no trembling, no stage fright, just clarity. She thanked her teachers, thanked her friends, thanked Principal Mercer, thanked the custodian who unlocked the science lab early for her before class. The audience smiled. Some parents laughed softly. Lorraine relaxed. Then Ava set down her prepared page. "There is one person I need to thank more than anyone else," she said. My throat tightened. I thought I knew where this was going. I did not. When my mother adopted me, she was 26 years old. She was single. She worked long hours for Child Protective Services. She had no husband, no financial safety net, and no family waiting to help her. She signed the papers in a little room with a table that shook every time she leaned on it, and then she brought me home anyway. The room went very still. This was no longer a standard graduation speech. She taught me that love is not proven by comfort. It is proven by choice. She packed my lunches. She read to me every night. She took me to the library every Tuesday. She made scrambled eggs in the mornings and left notes in my lunchbox that I still keep in a drawer. She worked all day, came home tired, and still found a way to make our home feel safe. I felt tears gathering already. "She did all of that alone," Ava said, "because her family decided not to help." That word, decided, fell into the room like a stone into still water. Lorraine shifted in her seat. Charles stared straight ahead. I used to wonder why I did not have grandparents at school events, why Christmas was just me and Mom and a tiny artificial tree, why there were no birthday cards, no visits, no extra chairs at the table. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. "Last summer," Ava said, "I found the answer." Then she reached into her gown pocket and took out the envelope. Cream paper, monogrammed, visible from the third row. My mother's face drained so quickly it looked unnatural. Ava held the envelope with both hands. "My grandmother wrote my mother a letter on the day she adopted me," she said. "I would like to read part of it." The silence that followed was almost physical. She unfolded the letter. "Naomi," she read, clear and calm, "I cannot support this decision. You are throwing your life away for someone else's mistake." A gasp rose from somewhere behind me. Ava did not rush. "That child comes from God knows where. You do not know her blood, her history, or the kind of trouble she will bring into your home?" Lorraine gripped the chair arm so tightly I could see her knuckles from where I sat. "And you expect us to act as if this is normal?" Ava lifted her eyes for a second, then continued. "Do not come here. Do not call. Do not bring her into this family. Until you come to your senses, you are on your own." She lowered the page slightly. "It was signed," Ava said, and this time she looked straight at Lorraine. "Mother." No one moved. No one coughed. No one dared fill the silence because the silence itself had become testimony. I was crying by then, though I had no memory of when the tears started. They were on my face, on my hands, on the folded program in my lap. Judith's hand found mine and squeezed hard enough to steady me. Ava folded the letter carefully but did not put it away. "That letter was written about me," she said, "when I was just a baby, about a child someone called someone else's mistake." Then she paused. "I graduated at the top of my class today." Something like a tremor passed through the audience, not noise, recognition. My mother never told me about that letter. She kept it in a shoebox on the top shelf of her closet. I think she kept it because some people hold on to pain not because they enjoy it, but because they need proof of what they survived. I covered my mouth. Ava's voice softened. "She did not adopt me to win an argument. She did not do it to prove anyone wrong. She adopted me because she believed I deserved a chance. Then she spent 14 years making sure I had one." Her voice cracked, just once. "To my mother," she said, "thank you for choosing me when other people chose fear." Thank you for building a family out of 2 people, a tiny Christmas tree, library Tuesdays, and scrambled eggs every morning. Thank you for never making me feel like I was a burden. You were enough. You were always enough. The applause began in the back. One person stood, then another, then 5, then 15. Then the entire room seemed to rise at once. Teachers, parents, students. Judith was on her feet before I was, caps tilted, hands striking together, some people crying openly. Some looking toward Lorraine in disbelief, some looking at Ava like they had just witnessed something holy and devastating at the same time. And then Lorraine stood, not to clap, to leave. Her chair scraped the gym floor with a harsh metallic sound that cut through the applause like a blade. She snatched up her purse and walked out. Charles followed, of course he followed, adjusting his blazer like composure mattered now. They moved down the same aisle they had entered 90 minutes earlier, the same aisle Lorraine had walked with pride, smiling at strangers, claiming connection she had not earned. This time, no one smiled back. Ava watched them go. She did not call after them. She did not flinch. That, more than anything, told me she had crossed a threshold no child should ever have to cross. She had learned exactly who deserved her grief and who did not. Principal Mercer stepped to the microphone after a stunned beat and said, voice unsteady, "Thank you, Ava." That was extraordinary. The applause surged again, this time louder, this time unanimous. I stood finally, though my knees felt weak beneath me. When the ceremony ended, I went backstage. Ava came toward me at a run, cap crooked now, gown swaying. She hit me at full speed and wrapped her arms around me. I held her so tightly I could feel her heartbeat against my ribs. "Are you angry?" she whispered into my shoulder. I pulled back just enough to look at her. "No. I found it last summer," she said, "when we cleaned the closet." "I know. You knew?" "I saw the box had moved." She swallowed hard. "Was it wrong?" I held her face in both hands. "That letter was about both of us," I said. "She wrote it to me, but she judged you with every line. You had every right to speak." Ava's mouth trembled for 1 second before she hit again in my shoulder. Judith came around the corner, wiping tears from her cheeks and laughing at the same time. "In 30 years," she said, "I have never heard a graduation speech like that. Parents came up to us one by one, handshakes, hugs, a teacher with mascara smudged under her eyes, a father who said, voice shaking, 'Your daughter is remarkable.'" "I know," I answered. Ava still held the envelope. She did not let go of it once. At 7:43 that night, Lorraine called. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. She was furious. "How could you allow that?" she demanded. "How could you sit there and let that child humiliate us in front of the entire town? That letter was private. It was between you and me. She had no right to read it publicly. No right at all. I will never forgive you for this." Not remorse, not shame, not even denial. Just outrage that the truth had escaped its envelope. I deleted the voicemail and poured myself a glass of water. My mother had heard her own words read back to her by the girl those words were meant to erase, and her only complaint was that witnesses existed. Judith called around 8. "Half the county is talking about that speech," she said. "Someone posted the video." "A video?" "The whole thing, it's spreading." I sat down at the kitchen table. "Naomi," Judith asked gently, "are you all right?" I looked toward the hallway where Ava's room light glowed under the door. "Yes," I said after a long moment. "I think for the first time in a long time, I really am." Melanie texted at 9:17. "I saw the video. I'm sorry. For all of it." I stared at the message. 14 years late. Typed through a screen. Safer than a phone call. Softer than what accountability deserved. But maybe it was the only version of courage she knew. "Thank you," I wrote back. Nothing more. Charles never called. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the week after. There are some people who mistake silence for dignity. He had been doing it all his life. Ava came into the living room in pajamas, hair damp from a shower, cheeks still pink from emotion and heat. "Want to get ice cream?" she asked. "It's almost 10. "I know." So we drove to the Dairy Queen on Route 7 and ate soft-serve cones leaning against the hood of my car in the summer night, while the parking lot lights buzzed overhead. The ice cream melted faster than we could keep up. After a while, Ava rested her head against my shoulder. "Mom?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you chose me." I looked at her, at the child they said would ruin my life, the girl who had just told a room full of people the truth without hatred in her voice. "Every single day," I said. "I'm glad I chose you every single day." When we got home, the shoebox was still in the closet. But the envelope was in Ava's room now, lying beside her composition books and her science ribbon. She kept it. She had earned it. 3 days later, I sat on the porch with coffee while the morning stayed still around me. Ava was asleep upstairs in the deep, peaceful sleep of someone who has finally put down a weight she should never have had to carry. I sat in the old wicker chair I'd bought at a yard sale years earlier and thought about everything that had brought us here. A newborn file on my desk, a wobbly table in an agency office, a crib assembled with a screwdriver that didn't quite fit, a 2-foot Christmas tree, a shoebox on a closet shelf, a little girl drawing a family tree with only 2 names and still calling it complete, a teenage daughter standing at a podium and returning stolen shame to its sender. I did not feel anger anymore. Not because Lorraine deserved peace from me, because I did. There was nothing left to prove. No apology I needed, no invitation I wanted, no old door worth knocking on. My mother wrote that letter to control the ending of a story she hated. She thought paper could settle blood. She thought rejection, once mailed, became permanent truth. She thought if she named me foolish and named my daughter a mistake, life would eventually obey her script. Instead, 14 years later, the child she rejected read those words under bright gym lights in a room full of witnesses and turned them into evidence of everything my mother failed to understand. Love had outlived judgment. Truth had outlived secrecy. And the family Lorraine refused to bless had flourished without her permission. I never called her back. Not out of revenge. Out of peace. Some doors close because you slam them. Some doors close because someone on the other side keeps choosing pride over love. And some doors, if we are honest, were never truly open at all. Family is not the people who demand a title. Family is the people who carry your name with care. Family is the person who stays, the one who chooses, the one who builds, the one who makes room at the table and means it. At 9 o'clock, Ava came downstairs with messy hair and sleepy eyes and stood in the kitchen doorway. "Scrambled eggs?" she asked. I smiled. Scrambled eggs. And that was justice, not a courtroom, not an apology, not my mother suddenly finding her conscience in old age. Justice was my daughter sleeping peacefully in a house love built. Justice was a room full of people hearing the truth. Justice was the woman who tried to bury us, walking out before the applause ended. Justice was knowing that the child once called a mistake had become the clearest proof that love, when chosen fully, can outgrow every insult thrown at it. I had spent years thinking the letter was a wound. I was wrong. In the end, it became a witness. And my daughter, standing straight with my mother's cruelty in one hand and her own dignity in the other, made sure the whole world knew which one would survive.